All right. What's up? What's up, everybody? So we're gonna get to it. We're gonna have a little conversation today talking about Black history. And the reason why I talk about Black history is because I think that it's highly important for you to chart the territory moving forward. You have to know from whence you come. And a lot of the problems that we have today in our society, especially with our people, we have to kind of equate the lack of knowledge of self to why some of these things are going on, why we don't value others' lives as much, why we disrespect our women, why we disrespect our brothers, why we disrespect family and friends. But I think also out of the negative, it's just to bring a sense of pride about who we are and a better understanding as how we contribute to this cultural melting pot here in America. And so, if we're going to talk about Black history, I think that you have to preface that conversation with why is it even important? Like, what is me knowing Black history going to change? And it's cool to know the history and be able to run off facts, but then how does that relate to my present day situation? J. Cole always said in one of his raps that Black Power doesn't keep the lights on. And so, you got to have that economic incentive coming in, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you don't satisfy what those things are, food, shelter, clothing, you know, if you don't take care of that first, then all of this other stuff seems like either I'm interested, but I don't really have the time because my focus has to be on these particular areas, like my household, my children, and all of that. But I will argue that once you do know a little bit about your history, and once you know about, well, what were some of our cultural norms and what did it look like to have pride in self, regardless of the money. I think that once you know some of those things, it ties into your character and it gives you a whole new momentum, which you wake up out of the bed and you approach life with. So I will say, like, that's why I'm gonna go through this, and we're gonna start this off first with the man, person that I used as a mentor, even though he wasn't alive, but his books, his words still live on, and that's the Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Um, One of the books that I definitely would recommend to you is The Miseducation of the Negro. And so on that slide, as you can see, I put, well, why is Black history important? And so what I'll say is this: Black history is important because it improves the social and psychological legacy for the individuals that have the ability to learn, remember, and articulate the tribulations and triumphs of ancestors in relevant situations. When you know your history, it stimulates internal pride, self determination, and self esteem built on substance that is able to withstand the various obstacles and adversities we each encounter in life. Once we learn the history, it is our responsibility to apply the best of what our ancestors provided and build upon those structures to make our communities better, stronger, and unified. We could become twice that man or woman with this information because we are the receivers, philosophers, archaeologists, anthropologists of previous findings, enabling us to recreate, implement, and refurbish the greatest minds of our humanity. So, as I said, in the interim, in order for us to move forward, we got to look back. And our ancestors, they left a lot of wisdom for us. And I believe that you can't teach what you don't know. So that wisdom that they left for us, it was so we would know how to move forward, and how we would know how to raise our families and interact and engage in our communities, as well as like what was important to become such monumental figures as Carter G. Woodson, as W.E.B. Du Bois, as Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, all of those. So another quote that I'm gonna read from you is there's another brother that I look up to, and has used his wisdom to help my areas of study and to improve on what I want my role and how I want my character to be with those I come involved with, whether that's organizationally, as a family member or a friend or just a community member. So that's going to be the Honorable Malcolm X. So Malcolm X stated that of all our studies, it is history that is best qualified to reward our research. And when you see that you've got problems, all you have to do is examine the historic method used all over the world by others who have problems similar to yours. And once you see how they got theirs straight, then you know how you can get yours straight. So I say today, I mean, if we look at other minority groups that exist in America, outside of our, excuse me, I got this matcha real quick. Gotta feed the body with the healthy things that it needs to further fuel itself. But as I was saying, so if you look at other minority groups, I mean, you can learn from them. You can learn from the Arabics. You can learn from the Asians. You can learn from, I mean, of course, whites. You can learn from all these different groups who have come to America, who have to exist alongside of us, and then see how organized their communities are, or see what they allow and what they don't allow. Let's just be honest. The cops are not going to go into some of those neighborhoods and commit the same atrocities that have been committed in our neighborhoods. And I think that's because they have more uniformity among those neighborhoods. And with that togetherness, it creates a strength. There's strength in numbers, and there's also strength in unity when we're all on the same page. And that doesn't mean we have to have all of the same views, but there are just some things that have to be foundational to our communities. And so I won't say any of them 100% have it right, but we have to look and we have to take the best of what exists in other cultures, and we can use that as a guide. Now, the important thing about this whole entire presentation is that we have things that are in our culture, that were embedded in our culture, that they learned from us, but because we forgot who we are, we don't even recognize that those are the gifts that our ancestors gave to us. So I think what we have to go is through a relearning process, and then start to adopt those things that are culturally relevant and historical to who our people are. So, as we move forward, as we're talking about culture, one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to talk about, where does African American culture even come from? What does it look like? What are the origins? And so, African American culture is rooted in the blend between the native African cultures of West Africa and Central Africa, and the European culture that has influenced and modified its development in the American South. So when we're dealing with the last part of European culture, what we have to understand is that the African Americans that we are today are products of the Africans that came to America through the transatlantic slave trade. Some of us, right? Because everybody, and we're going to touch on that, everybody didn't come to America who were from African origins through the slave trade. We're going to talk about the free Africans that lived here and that traveled here, and were always traveling back and forth between the mother continent and what they call dubbed the New World here today. So, but before I move to that, we're going to also have to get some definitions in order. So what is culture? Well, culture is the collective customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. So when we talk about the culture, like, we need to understand what it is that we mean by that. And so, moving forward, it says right here, although slavery greatly restricted the ability for Africans to practice their original cultural traditions, many practices, values, and beliefs survive, and over time have modified and or blended with European cultures and other cultures, such as that of Native Americans. After emancipation, unique African American traditions have continued to flourish as distinctive traditions or radical innovations in music, art, literature, religion, cuisine, and other fields. 20th century sociologists such as Gunnar Myrdal believed that African Americans had lost most of their cultural ties with Africa, but anthropological field research by Melville Herskovitz and others demonstrated that there has been a continuum of African traditions among Africans of the diaspora. The greatest influence of African cultural practices on European culture is found below the Mason-Dixon line in the American South. So, as I said, we're going to kind of touch on African American culture and talk about who we are. But first, I always believe we have to go back to the root. We have to go back to the source. And so, as we get that started, I'm going to go ahead and get into this presentation. We're going to jump down a little bit real quick. So let's talk about El Kebulon. So Al Kebulon, that was one of the original names for Africa. And as you can see through this map, which I'll have another map that will show, but these color groupings are pretty much based off of the different European societies and how they own these particular carvings of the African continent. So, just to go ahead and frame the discussion, you have 54 countries, you have 9 territories that exist on the continent of Africa. So let's get to the fossil evidence of early African existence. So the most exciting and widely cited findings from Africa bearing on this issues are from the cave sites of the Classis River mouth of the Cape Coast of Africa. And as you can see, I got my sources in there if you want to check out some of this and see where I'm getting some of this information from. The fossils are undeniably the remains of anatomically modern Homo sapiens. Geological evidence and the oxygen isotopic content of associated marine shells suggests a correlation with last interglacial sea levels dating back to more than 100,000 years. If the dates from Classis, Omo, and elsewhere are accurate, they are startling because they show that the modern human beings in Africa predate those in Europe by many tens of thousands of years. So what we're doing is we're setting the stage for life existence, right? And I'm saying that this is the research that I found, right? So based off this and the consensus being that life started in Africa, we're gonna roll with that, and then we're gonna work our way down through history to see how things changed over. As you just sit here, as you build with me, and as you learn more, and we go through these. And I'm asking you to conduct your own research, and all I'm trying to do is not do an in-depth dive, but I'm trying to give you a starting point. Everybody always asks me, well, what books can I read? What sources can I go to? Like, if I want to learn all of this, like, it's just so much information. It's all over the place. You can start here, you can start there. Look, I'll tell you like this, just start somewhere. Like, and as you do that, just keep in mind that you can't start talking about history and fully understand history if you start in the middle. However, you can begin to start to put together some types of understandings, or you can become a master of particular time periods. So whether that's the civil rights, whether that's pre-slavery, whether that's the just continent of Africa and their politics and economics, like, the goal for us as a people is to learn more about who we are and learn more about the influential figures in our movement. So I tell you, just start anywhere, but don't grab hold of something so much and then start to believe in this ideology if you know that it started in the middle of the overall story. So with that, I mean, we're going to continue on. So the only claims for anatomically modern Homo sapiens outside of Africa of an age approaching that of Africa finds are those for modern human specimens from the Levantine site of, I think that's Kafze. So I put in parentheses, so that's near the Sea of Galilee, or if you want to look on the map, the Greek Orthodox Church of Annunciation. So which is, that's kind of like over there by Israel, way north, I think, of Jerusalem. So that's just a little area on the map, so I can kind of place you in a landmass when we talk about this. It was sedimentological and faunal evidence that the Kavze material may be as much as 80,000 or perhaps 100,000 years old. More recently, this team has reported thermoluminescence dates on burned flints from the hominid bearing level at Kafze of the order of 92,000 years. These dates are consistent with either an African or a Southwest Asian origin for modern people. Now, this is the fossil evidence right here. And so, mind you, we talk about 90,000 years ago. In order for us to get here, how we are today, you cannot discount the efforts of these peoples, Homo sapiens, as you can see, or Homo sapiens sapiens, that existed many, 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 many years ago. And so I say that the form that we're in right now, and I got to do more research on this, I believe comes from the last ice age, which is about 10,000, 12,000 years ago. So if it wasn't for them, then you wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be here, and none of these people would be here. So you kind of got to give them their praises and talk about what their culture was, talk about what their way of life was. I won't call it religion, but what their way of life was, because it got us here today. So let's continue moving forward. So genetic evidence of early African existence. Research in the field of human molecular genetics has lent support to the idea of an African origin for our species. Data from the study of human mitochondrial DNA were outlined at the Cambridge Conference by Mark Stone King, who is a representative from University of Cal. African samples of contemporary human mitochondrial DNA show a higher degree of variability reflects the time elapsed since population members shared a common ancestor. This finding suggests a greater antiquity for the African material. As mitochondrial DNA is inherited through the female line, Can et al., 1987, proposed that all human mitochondrial DNA was inherited from a single African female or closely related group of females. According to the estimates of mitochondrial DNA mutation rates, the mitochondrial ancestor lived between 140,000 and 280,000 years ago. So why is this important? You may hear people say, there isn't a multiple races. There's only one race. There's a human race. And we all know racism was a social construct, and we talk about the origins of race to talk about black, white, yellow, red, whatever way they used to classify. But it was a social construct to create a hierarchy among people. But if you look at this last sentence or last two sentences, it is saying that they proposed that all human mitochondrial DNA was inherited from a single African female or closely related group of females, which means what? We're all the same people. We got different pigmentations, different mutations, different places that we may have lived. But if we all originated from a single female or a closely related group of females, it says that they all came from where? The continent of Africa. Well, some people ain't gonna like to hear that, but we talking about science right here. So don't forget, if you got something that disputes that, and you could provide sources, and these are credible sources, then we could talk about that. But let's just move forward with that particular idea. My goal is to bring us all together. It's not to separate us, but for those of us who want to be ignorant, of course, we don't need you in this movement as we try to bring the culture up and as we try to move people together. And you also have to realize everybody can't come with you. It's okay if we leave a few people behind. That's fine. So let's just go ahead and move forward. Another alternative mitochondrial DNA for an African origin was provided at the conference by James Wainscoat, who presented data from nuclear DNA, which are suggestive of an African origin also. Most polymorphisms among the alpha beta globins are not found outside the African continent, and the degree of genetic diversity in the African sample suggests that it is indeed the most ancient. And that's even today. You have some people, I think is it the Twa or Ubuntu, and I know you also have Khoisan, but I think one of them, and I can't remember which one, but they have the most diversity in genetic sampling in the world. So everybody else has different mixtures, but they have the most diversity. So that would probably conclude to an origin story. So you have the language of the early archaic Homo sapiens. I'm still doing research on that, so I won't delve too much into that. But you also have another theory called the Out of Africa movement. Sources in here, and that's pretty much just elaborating more on what I was talking about with the fossils. This is another source, and this group is saying that somewhere between 80,000 and 50,000 years ago, a single human migration out of Africa became the forebears of all non-Africans. So we got different sources and people, but here's my thing. When we was all going through school, they didn't really bring this out. I can't remember any classes on my own. I don't know what your experience was, where they were even talking about this, maybe outside of a Black history course, but this should be in geography, in history, especially if you're talking about world history. It should be somewhere where we're kind of talking about these origins and we're using the minds of our young, our best and brightest to really pick these theories apart and to have more elaborate conversations, but they're not. And you have to ask, well, why? As you can see in that, I did mention the Khoisan, the Twa, and the Bantu down there as well. So we go into Ethiopia's oldest daughter, mind you, Ethiopia's oldest daughter. So you got some people out here who just want to act like Kemet, known as Egypt today, but Kemet was the first. It's the first. It was the most civilized. It gave humanity existence, all this to the world. I'm big on ancient Kemet, ancient Egyptian history, but I'm not going to sit up there and try to make us the first when the evidence and the research doesn't really say that. Now, what I will say is that the increase or the successes of Egypt and Kemet, you could still see them resonate in our society today. And the greats of the Greeks and the Romans, they got that from Egypt or ancient Kemet. So I think what we do have to talk about is the magnificence of Kemet and talk about how it was those things that they were setting up in that civilization. And that's the recorded information that we can find, how that contributed to who we are today, and study them to figure out how they got things right. And let's incorporate that into our society. Whatever they got wrong, let's just do away with it. But you can't create the experiment, you can't do the work to figure that out if we don't even get taught about the origins and talk about how that particular society is conducive to what we have going on here today. So, if you talk about the third dynasty, the first architecture and father of medicine was a gentleman named Imhotep. And it meant he who cometh in peace. He was one of the most revered men in history. And when I have not Hippocrates, who was said to be the father of science, I am talking about Hippocrates in the sense of they give that credit to him as being the father of medicine. But thousands of years that predates him was another gentleman that was doing all types of surgeries. And I think that's in my next slide. No, it's not. But he's doing all types of surgeries, coming up with cures for diseases, simple things, operations, just there started on the continent of Africa and then went out to the rest of the world and taught them about medical advancement. So Imhotep, he was also architecture. So remember I said that. He built the first pyramid known as the Step Pyramid in Saqqara near Memphis, which was 204 feet high and was the tallest structure of its time. Egypt, what's important about Egypt is that it was historically a land of knowledge where science, math, and astronomy reigned supreme and was taught in the mystery schools by ancient Kemetic priests. Why don't we hear about science, math, and astronomy's origins being on the continent of Africa? Our kids struggle in our school systems across the nation when it comes to science, math, or if you want to talk about STEM, they struggle in this. And I think they struggle because they don't understand that they are the originators of that. That origin is within their DNA. That is not, those concepts were not something that was foreign to our people. That was something that we were doing, and we exemplified that in our structures. So our kids, I think they need to learn more of that so they have better confidence when they make those approaches, and they'll realize that this is something that is regular. Scholarship is regular, intelligence, the intellect is regular to who our people are. So pyramids, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, and you'll know them as the famous pyramids at Giza, but these are the names of those pyramids and who they were. And these were Black, or let's just say African, dark skinned. I don't really like Black because I'm like, what is Black? What is brown? What is white? If you look at my skin, if I tell my daughter, can you go and grab a Crayola crayon out the box and tell me what color you are, I mean, one that corresponds to what color you are, I'm pretty sure no kid is going to grab Black, unless they are that color. But no kid that's my complexion is going to grab Black. So I think we need to change the language, because then I would just go move forward and ask, well, point out Black on a map, a landmass called Black. You feel me? So when you come up with those terminology, I figure, what is the deeper psychological thing that you're trying to do to those people once they start to claim those origins? So you're trying to disconnect them with the landmass that is their origins, because you may be trying to lay claim, or you may be trying to give that landmass to another group of people. So I see a lot of people nowadays, everybody's getting an Ankh. They got Ankh necklaces, they got Ankh tattoos, Ankh on a shirt. I see a lot of people with the Ankh. I've even seen the Ankh mixed in with other religious characters and figures. And so it's cool. Like, I'm glad to see people, you know, espousing our old ancestral ideas or designs, but you can't wear it in ignorance. You can't wear it without really knowing what you have. Because here's something: you may not even support and represent what the Ankh actually means. You may not believe in the idea of what the Ankh, but you got it around your neck and you walking around, and it's like, well, if I say something, then you get offended. But I'm like, wait, you got on the Ankh, so you believe in the concept of man, woman, and child. You believe that it takes that's the Holy Trinity. That's the Holy Trinity that represents life. That you understand that you need those three things to come together to create life: the masculine, the feminine, to create to principles to come together, or masculine, feminine ideas, or masculine and feminine organs to come together to create life. And so, another thing that it signifies wisdom and insight on the highest level. And it's also, as we spoke about, a fertility symbol. So if you look at the bottom part, we have right there the phallus. The phallus is represented all throughout Egypt. The phallus is represented all throughout in Washington, D.C. with the Washington Monument. Well, what was that phallus? What is a phallus? And so if you move and you look up and you see the loop represents the womb. So, you have the male coming together with the womb, and then the two sides represent the children. So you have the intersection of those that help to create this whole entire form, which means life. And so another thing that we have on here is the spiritual meaning. And so from a spiritual point of view, the Ankh represented the key to all hidden knowledge. The loop further symbolized the eternal soul, as it has no beginning or end. So we understand the principle of energy. Our energy can neither be created nor destroyed. This is something that the ancient Egyptians also believed. This is something that they also practice. So, this is thousands of years ago, and they kind of understood these concepts. The cross and the spiritual interpretation represents death, and the Ankh was the key to unraveling the mysteries of life and death. All right, so let's move forward. The Eye of Haru, the right eye. So the Eye of Haru, you may know that name as being Horus, but Haru was the original name. How many of y'all here knew that the eye, it breaks down and it gives up the 6 senses? 6. Now, most of us know 5, but as you can see in there, they had smell, sight, hearing, taste, touch, and thought. The Eye of Horus was believed to have healing and protective power, and it was used as a protective amulet. It was also used as a notation of measurement, particularly for measuring the ingredients in medicines and pigments. The symbol was divided into 6 parts, represent the shattering of Horus's eye into 6 pieces, and each piece was associated with one of the 6 senses and a specific fraction. All right, let's move forward. So this is one of the richest men that ever lived, even to this day. And hold on. All right, I love talking about this brother because what they don't tell you is that even to this day, one of the richest people that existed was an African man, or a man of dark skin, pigmentation, melanin. That was somebody who came from our ancestral lineage. And so, you have the great Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, all those monumental figures in our history, or not in our history, but in our present day, and they still have not amassed the amount of resources and money as the great Mansa Musa. So he was the emperor of Mali in the 14th century, and his entourage included about 60,000 men. His land was rich in resources, mainly gold. And so during his reign, Europe was famished and in the middle of civil wars. His empire stretched 2,000 miles, and the land that he was in control of included Mauritania, Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Burkina Faso, Mali, Nigeria, and Chad. And so let me know, as Kanye West said in one of his songs, it's in the black man's soul to rock that gold. You spend your whole life trying to get that ice. So this was something that we've always been into. And I know, you look at today and they're like, all the rappers and everybody got this bling and people trying to spend all of this money and they're trying to go broke on acquiring gold, riches, platinum, or whatever that is. But this is an origin story. We're talking about 1300s. We in the 21st century now, and this right here is talking about the 14th century. That's well embedded in our DNA if you want to talk about tradition. So I would definitely say look up the life of Mansa Musa. And remember what I told y'all, this is just foundational stuff. This is not the end of it. We're going to go more in depth on here. We're going to have whole entire movements that we're going to explore. But for now, I just want to give you different parts of the storyline so that you can have either starting points. If you see something like you delve in it a lot more. And, we're just going to elaborate like that. So I'm gonna kind of skip around. His reign lasted 25 years, so we always been leaders. We knew how to rule entire nations successfully. We knew how to work with partnerships, trade. We knew war tactics. All of that is embedded in who we are as a people. And I can't wait to get down to Harriet Tubman and tell you about her a little bit and what tribe she has origins in, because you'll see that they were a warrior group, which explains why she was able to do she was able to do what she was able to do 13 times. So Mansa Musa, so he was over Gal and Timbuktu, which soon flourished as centers of Quranic learning. So we're gonna get into our Islamic brothers and sisters. The Sankara Madrasa in Timbuktu had the finest library in Africa and gained an international reputation. Scholars from Islamic world traveled to Mali to study history, geography, medicine, and astronomy. Now, Mali, we talking about Mali, and Mali is where? On the continent of Africa. We talking about scholars who came from all over to study history, geography, medicine, and astronomy. So now you got two different land masses on the continent. You got West Africa and you got East Africa. So the Central Africa has to have something going on too. So under his reign, Islam came less to be seen as a foreign religion and more as a Black African faith too. The emperor's skill was to respect traditional African beliefs and avoid conflicts between the two. But we can see those who got into power later on, they wanted to suppress traditional African belief systems, and they wanted to erase those traditional African belief system and take them into theirs, and then discount you for being a source of that information. And then they wanted all of the praise and all of the recognition. But we'll go on to that. I will say that a lot of these religions that are popular now, they have roots in Africa, but they have roots in other African traditions. And some of that information was pulled out, put up under another name, and the story was retold, remixed, and then to give origins not to our ancestors and people, but to other figures and people who came from out of Africa, who were still in darkness, still civil wars. I think it says that about Mansa Musa. As you can see, during his reign in Europe was famished and in the middle of civil wars. We're gonna move past Askia the Great. We'll get to him. So what I also want to talk about, we gotta big up our women, warrior queens of Africa. We have to big up our women and talk about their magnificence in their contribution to our war taxes, but also to our civilizations. So shout out, Queen Nzinga, Queen Hatshepsut, Queen Candace of Moreau, Queen Nandi, Queen Nefertari and Nefertiti, Queen Eminatu, and Queen Asantewa. Teach your daughters about these people, teach your sisters about these people, teach your mothers about these people. Because women we couldn't do it without women, and women in our society played a huge part historically when it came to protecting our nations, our land, our household. So, we'll dig into a couple of these. You can see Queen Nzinga of Mbande was a powerful 17th century African ruler of the Ndongo and Matamba kingdoms, which is now modern day Angola. And Zinga fearlessly and cleverly fought for the freedom and stature of her kingdoms against the Portuguese who were colonizing the area at that time. If you talk about the transatlantic slave trade, then you got to talk about the Portuguese, because they were the ones who kind of came down and really set slavery into a hyper mode of taking our African brothers and sisters from the coast and bringing them over to the New World. Queen Hatshepsut. When you talk about the pharaohs, you hear about King Tut, or you hear about Ramesses, but you got to talk about Queen Hatshepsut. She need to get her praises too. We talking about ruling for over 20 years. So Hatshepsut was the longest reigning female pharaoh in Egypt in the 15th century BC. She is considered one of Egypt's most successful pharaohs, and she is also responsible for many architectural marvels and warfare. So, we just talked about Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa was in the 14th century. Queen Hatshepsut was in the 15th century. So, that's just different kingdoms and queendoms that were ruling at the time on different parts of Africa that were successful. So Queen Candace of Moreau. So talk about Alexander the Fake. I don't know how great he was, because some of that stuff that he was doing, it doesn't even, it pales in comparison to some of the accomplishments of our brothers and sisters historically. So Alexander had reached Kemet and was gearing up to battle in Ethiopia. But legend has it that Candace advised Alexander to leave the region immediately, and if he refused, after defeating his army, she would cut off his head and roll it down a hill. And so she was able to actually hold off Alexander for many, many years. And I would challenge you to look into that to see how long it was and what those encounters were like, and how Alexander the Great finally was able to invade over there in that particular landmass. I'm gonna skip down. You got Queen Nefertari. Nefertari was the wife of Queen of Ramesses II. She lived during the New Kingdom period and was a member of Egypt's 19th dynasty. Her tomb is the most beautiful found in the Valley of the Queens. And then you have Nefertiti, whose name means a beautiful woman has come, was the queen of Egypt and wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten during the 14th century BC. All right, we getting some overlap with Mansa Musa again. She and her husband established the code of Aten, the sun god, and promoted Egyptian artwork that was radically different from his predecessors. Then you have Queen Amanatu, and Queen Asantewa was the queen mother of Ijisu in the Ashanti Empire, now part of modern day Ghana, still around today. In 1900, she led 4,000 warriors in the Ashanti War, known as the War of the Golden Stool, and also known as the Ya Asantewa War against British colonials. And so, as we peek into this and we talk about these warfare that went on, I have to talk about these shirts that I see where people say, "Oh, I'm not my ancestors. You'll catch these hands." Uh, the level of ignorance that you show when you wear a shirt like that is this, like, you essentially just saying like, "Oh, our ancestors just sat around and just let these things happen. Our ancestors didn't try to fight back. They didn't try to do anything. They just were complacent and complicit in their own, whether it's enslavement or subjugation." And contrary to popular belief, once you start to open up some books of research, our ancestors under those conditions did things that I think some of us today wouldn't even blink twice at doing. We would be the ones that's going along to try to get along or try to negotiate ourselves out of that. So I have to caution people when they wear shirts like that, is what message are you really delivering about those who came before you, while you get to walk around all liberated and free, and you get to go to whatever schools you want to, stores you want to, walk down streets, go through towns, buy real estate here. Like that stuff just didn't come because people just lay it down, and then finally people just voluntarily took their foot up off our necks or their knees up off our necks. That came because our people were willing to fight. And I think the other thing you have to understand too is sometimes we may give our power away because we look at the conditions in which we may find ourselves in, but we don't look at how long we were the rulers and we were controlling kingdoms, queendoms across the world. I mean, you talk about, well, it's been like 400 years, 500, 600 years of subjugation. And if you want to add in that sub-Saharan slave trade, which involved the Arabs subjugating the Africans, let's just bump it up to a cool, nice round number of 2,000 years. But we got civilizations, as you've seen from the fossil evidence, where our people were in existence for tens of thousands of years. So if you even put this number into percentages, it just doesn't balance out. We have been under, and I would even say that that may not even be true. It depends on the perspective that you're looking at. But let's just go with it for the sake of the conversation. We have been under the heels and the feet of people and not been able to rule our society for a smaller, very minuscule amount of time than we were on top. So I think we have to be very careful about some of the things that we say and some of the shirts that we wear, because it just really shows our ignorance. So I'll just say that, and then let's go ahead and move forward. So y'all recognize this? You see some of the same color schemes, and um, on the right we have the infamous, um, we have the out of the Black Panthers, the Dora Milaje. Sorry about that. And on the left we have the Dahomey Amazon women. And so the Dahomey Amazons, they were the Mino, were frontline soldiers from the kingdom of Dahomey, which forms part of modern day Benin. There were approximately 6,000 women that made up this army. Let's go back. Let's look at these sisters. These were warrior sisters. You could see them with the swords in their hand. They're posing. They were ready for combat. They were going on the front lines to also help to protect their people. So again, we have to kind of look at these narratives and where they talk about our sisters are weak and they need to be saved and helped. No, 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 no. What they need is partnership. What our sisters need to understand is that the power exists in their minds, in their hands, in their feet, and in their bodies to help liberate as well. And we're going to need them in this movement if we want to liberate the hearts and minds of our people as well, because they are very capable and always shown themselves to be capable in this great work and effort that we have to engage in. Araminta Ross. So here's my hint. I was a conductor of the railroad for 8 years, and I can say what most conductors can't say. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger. Araminta Ross, that was the original name of the famous Harriet Tubman. And so when you talk about Harriet Tubman, the reason why I connected these two is because she was from the Ashanti tribe. She came back. Let's go back to our warrior queens. She came from the Ashanti tribe, um, and is a descendant, well, not a descendant, but was also a part of the same place that Queen Asantewa was from. And so we know them to be a warrior people. We know them to be a strong people. And so it's no question as to why Harriet Tubman was able to do what she was able to do, and where she got that courage from. That courage is already in her DNA. It was embedded in her. She could do nothing else but fight to liberate our people and play such a monumental role, and the brains and the wits that existed, as well as the tapping into consciousness in the spiritual realm. Hearing she said she used to hear voices, and she saw images and things, and I'll have to say that was the Most High talking to her. But that Most High has always been connected, because we have been a people that's always been spiritual. When I say Most High, I'm not tying into any religious preface. What I'm saying is that the Almighty Creator, the universe, the energy that can either be created or destroyed, she was in tune with that, just like a lot of our ancestors was in tune and tapped into that. So you look at the life of Harriet Tubman. I don't believe that we really fully understand what her contribution was and who she was, but how was she able to do that? Remember, we're talking about the why today. That's what we're talking about. That's the way we're going to approach all our research from here on out. That's the way we're going to approach our conversations, our plan, and our vision. We're going to talk about the why. Let's get to the crux. Queen Nani, born in present day Ghana. Here we go. We got another Ghanaian connection. Around 1686, Nanny was the renowned leader of the Windward Maroons. It was probably a Khan and part of the Asante Nation. Together with Captain Quail, she led the Windward Maroons in the First Maroon War, providing tactical guidance and proving herself a fierce fighter against the British. It is believed that her warriors freed approximately 1,000 enslaved people, and that's my sources: Orishas, goddesses, and voodoo queens. Let me say, if you have not read that book, that is a phenomenal book. I'm trying to see if it's back here on my shelf. I got another shelf that's out in the living room where that book might be at, but that's a phenomenal book. So then, we look into the origins of our spiritual beliefs, but this is from the perspective of a woman. This is dealing with the women. I'll call them gods, but I don't really like to use that terminology. But we're talking about the women goddesses that existed in traditional African spiritual systems. Where are we gonna go? First Africans to arrive in America. Oh man, so let's see, what do we have here? So, okay, so we got the Africans arrived in North America a century before the Mayflower landed at Plymouth Rock in 1620. You got the 1619 Project, a great documentary that I definitely look forward to exploring even more. But we're talking about right here 1620, but we're going to talk about the first African to arrive modern times. Now, mind you, this is modern. You got a book, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, who wrote They Came Before Columbus, which talks about ancient Africans coming to the Americas. But we're going to deal with kind of like contemporary relative times. So we're going to say the first African to arrive was free, and his name was Juan Garrido, born in West Africa around 1480. Hold up, let me step away real quick, because I definitely want to get this book to show you kind of like where I got this information from. So hold on. We're back real quick. So the book I wanted to go ahead and get for you all was this book. It's called 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro by Henry Louis Gates Jr. And so I got a lot of monumental information out of this book, including this fact right here about Juan Garrido. And each one of the chapters, they just go through and they have pictures, and each chapter is based off of a different figure or a different important time throughout history. So I would say, if you want an overall comprehensive book about Black history, get 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro. And let me go back real quick, because remember we talked about the Orishas, goddesses, and voodoo queens. Definitely we get this book by Lilith Dorsey. Great book as well. But I'll tell you, if you want another, what I call these is microwaved information about Black history, but it's better than nothing. Here's another book. It's just called the Black History Book. This book has facts, and what I love about this book is it goes through chronologically. So it starts off kind of like how I started off talking to you all. It starts off from early beginning of time, talking about the fossils and talking about ancient history, prehistory. We talking about where is it? Also, what you see right there, Africa, the mother of humanity. So here's another source. If you want to source up real quick, talking about these different books. This says out here the first humans 300,000 years ago. So this is another great book. It's just called the Black History Book. Many different doctors and professionals came through to contributors came through to write this book. So this book and that 100 Amazing Facts About the Negroes would be great starting points if you just kind of want to microwave your information. And then what you could do is just expound on different parts of time and use these as resources to learn a lot more about different time periods. So let's continue on. So who was Juan Garrido? He was a conquistador and joined Diego Vázquez de Cuellar and Ponce de Leon in the colonization of Cuba and Puerto Rico. He also joined de Leon on his travels to Florida, which brought Mr. Garrido to the United States. Africans traveled to the New World in America. So before the existence of slavery, the great ancient civilizations of Egypt and West Africa traveled to the Americas, contributing immensely to early American civilization by importing the art of pyramid building, political systems, and religious practices, as well as, again, mathematics, writing, and a sophisticated calendar. One of the first documented instances of Africans sailing and settling in the Americas were Black Egyptians led by King Ramesses III during the 19th dynasty in 1292 BC. In fact, in 445 BC, the Greek historian Herodotus wrote of the ancient Egyptian pharaohs' great seafaring and navigational skills. Further concrete evidence noted by Dr. Imhotep and largely ignored by Eurocentric archaeologists includes Egyptian artifacts found across North America, from the Algonquin writings on the East Coast to the artifacts and Egyptian place names in the Grand Canyon. So, I mean, hey, there goes some sources right there for you, some primary sources that tell you to go to the Grand Canyon, and then also look for the Algonquin writings that were on the East Coast that's supposed to substantiate the fact that we had been traveling as far back as either Ramesses' time, which is 1292 BC, or whatever the later times with the Algonquins peoples. And then after all, history will tell you that seafaring is the quintessential European achievement, the single endeavor of which Europeans are awfully proud. Seafaring allowed Europe to conquer the world. The notion that Black Africans braved the roaring waters of the Atlantic Ocean and beat Europeans to the New World threatens an historically white sense of ownership over the seas. Listen, we only here to write the record. We only here to tell the truth, not a truth. So, if it pisses some people off, just think about some other people have been having to deal with other information for a long time that seems to have been wrong. So just imagine how they were feeling. This isn't to make anybody upset. Of course, this is just to bring forth information and allow the scholarship to either determine or undetermine the um, substantial evidence, I guess, that exists of postulating that Africans were traveling to the Americas before the Europeans were. And so I think right now let's just leave it right here for a little while. We'll leave it right here and we'll get back into it. And I think we'll move on our next. We'll move forward talking about the Haitian Revolution, 1791 to 1804. We'll touch on that a little bit, as well as some other movements that exist. So as you can see, we're coming up into more contemporary times as we worked our way through. Don't forget, this is only a foundational starting point for this information. There are movements that I went through that we are going to do deeper dives in, but I just need y'all to stick with me. Let me know whatever it is that you may want to learn more about. I'm gonna put my email on here and we're gonna get into it, and we're gonna have to unlearn some things that we learned about ourselves, but we're going to learn some new information so that we can fill our minds with the best, most adequate information that helps push us individually and then our people forward. So it was a pleasure spending time with y'all. This is just an intro video. We're going to get into it. Just stick with me.